Beloved, today we stand at the gateway of a new month, not by accident, not by chance, but by divine appointment. As February opens before us, we refuse to step into it with fear, confusion, or uncertainty. We enter this month armed with faith, wrapped in peace, and filled with holy expectation. In the spirit and prophetic authority exemplified by Dr. Cindy Trimm, we declare that this month will respond to our prayers, align with God's will, and yield divine results. This is not just another Sunday prayer. This is a moment of alignment, a sacred pause where we reset our hearts, recalibrate our minds, and decree that what God has promised will manifest. Today we pray with confidence, believing that February will bring clarity, breakthroughs, restoration, and favor. As we lift our voices, may heaven respond, doors open, and destiny move forward. Get ready. This month will not leave you the same. Entering a new month with unshakable faith begins with understanding that faith is not a feeling but a decision, a posture of the spirit that refuses to be moved by what the eyes see or what circumstances suggest. Faith is the quiet confidence that God is already present in the future you are walking into, waiting for you with provision, instruction, and victory. When a new month opens, it brings with it unknowns, unanswered questions, and uncharted territory. But faith declares that nothing ahead is unfamiliar to God. Faith says that before February ever appeared on the calendar, God had already gone ahead to align moments, conversations, opportunities, and even challenges to serve a greater purpose in your life. To enter the month with faith is to step forward believing that God is intentional, strategic, and involved in every detail of your journey. Unshakable faith does not deny reality, but it refuses to be ruled by it. It acknowledges pressure without bowing to it and recognizes obstacles without surrendering authority to them. Many people enter a new month carrying the weight of the previous one. Disappointments, delays, prayers that seemed unanswered, doors that did not open. Faith demands that you do not drag yesterday's defeats into today's possibilities. Faith requires release. It requires the courage to say that what did not work before will not define what is about to happen. The calendar may have changed, but faith insists that your mindset must also change. You cannot expect new results while rehearsing old fears. Faith also requires alignment. It is impossible to walk in strong faith while speaking words of doubt, fear, and defeat. What you declare at the beginning of a month sets the spiritual atmosphere for everything that follows. When you speak faith-filled words, you are not merely expressing optimism, you are establishing authority. Words spoken in faith activate heaven's response. They position you to receive divine instruction and supernatural direction. Faith-filled declarations are not wishful thinking. They are spiritual agreements with what God has already spoken concerning your life. When you say, "This month will work in my favor," you are aligning your mouth with God's intention. Entering the month with faith also means trusting God's timing. Faith understands that delay does not mean denial, and silence does not mean absence. Some of the most powerful work God does happens in unseen spaces, in moments where it feels like nothing is moving. Faith remains steady in those moments, refusing to panic or rush ahead of God. Trusting God's timing requires humility, patience, and surrender. It means believing that God knows when you are ready to receive what you are praying for and when the environment is prepared to sustain it. Faith does not force outcomes, it follows divine order. Unshakable faith is built through consistent relationship with God, not through emotional highs. It is developed in prayer, strengthened through the word, and refined through obedience. When you pray at the beginning of a new month, you are not just asking God to bless your plans, you are inviting Him to shape them. Faith submits personal agendas to divine wisdom. It says, "God, order my steps, adjust my desires, and redirect me if necessary." This level of faith trusts God enough to say no to what looks good if it is not God. It understands that obedience is safer than opportunity when God is not involved. Faith also gives you the strength to move forward even when clarity is incomplete. Many people delay action because they are waiting for perfect conditions, complete understanding, or guarantee outcomes. Faith does not wait. For certainty, it moves with conviction. It takes the next step even when the full picture is unclear, trusting that God reveals direction progressively. Faith understands that obedience often unlocks the next instruction. When you step into February with faith, you do not need to know everything. You only need to know who is leading you. Unshakable faith changes how you respond to opposition. Challenges will arise in every month, but faith determines whether those challenges intimidate you or strengthen you. Faith sees resistance as confirmation that something valuable is ahead. It understands that pressure often precedes promotion, and testing often comes before transition. When opposition arises, faith does not retreat, it stands firm. It reminds you that if God allowed the challenge, He has already provided the grace to overcome it. Faith keeps you grounded when circumstances attempt to shake you. Faith also influences how you wait. Waiting in faith is not passive, it is active trust. It is continuing to pray, continue to prepare, continue to show up, and continue to serve while expecting God to move. Faith-filled waiting does not complain or compare. It does not look at others' progress and assume neglect. It understands that God's process is personal and precise. Entering the month with faith means refusing to grow weary during the waiting season, knowing that perseverance produces maturity and strength. Another dimension of unshakable faith is the ability to see Baal, ND, limitations. Faith looks at lack and sees provision. It looks at weakness and sees potential. It looks at impossibility and sees opportunity for God to demonstrate power. When you enter a new month with faith, you stop measuring your future by your resources and start trusting God's supply. Faith shifts dependence away from human effort and places it firmly in divine provision. It reminds you that God is not limited by economy, background, experience, or history. Faith also requires guarding your inner life. What you listen to, what you meditate on, and who you allow to influence you matters deeply. Faith is fragile when constantly exposed to negativity, fear-based conversations, and discouraging voices. To protect your faith, you must be intentional about what feeds your spirit. Entering the month with faith may require distancing yourself from voices that weaken your confidence in God. Faith flourishes in environments of truth, encouragement, and spiritual alignment. Unshakable faith empowers bold prayer. Faith does not pray small, timid prayers rooted in fear of disappointment. It prays with expectation, believing that God responds to boldness. Bold prayer does not demand. It trusts. It does not manipulate. It submits. It prays with confidence that God is both willing and able. When you enter a new month with faith, your prayers shift from survival to significance, from maintenance to movement, from fear to authority. Faith also changes how you view yourself. It remi NDSU that you are not walking into the month as a victim of circumstances, but as a carrier of divine purpose. Faith affirms your identity as chosen, equipped, and empowered. It silences the inner voice of inadequacy and replaces it with truth. Entering February with faith means refusing to label yourself by past failures or present struggles. Faith calls you by your future, not your history. Unshakable faith allows you to rest even while believing for more. Rest is not the absence of activity, it is the absence of anxiety. Faith rests because it trusts God to work even when you cannot see immediate results. It allows you to sleep at night knowing that God is handling what you cannot control. This rest strengthens your spirit and sharpens your discernment. When you enter the month with faith, you carry peace alongside expectation, confidence alongside humility, action alongside trust. Faith ultimately is a daily choice. You choose it in the morning when you wake up. You choose it in conversations. You choose it in decisions. You choose it when results are delayed. Entering the new month with unshakable faith means committing to that choice again and again, regardless of circumstances, emotions, or outcomes. It means anchoring your heart in the unchanging nature of God while everything around you continues to shift and evolve. Walking in God's peace despite uncertainty begins with the understanding that peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of divine assurance. CE in the middle of it. Peace is not something you wait for circumstances to provide. It is something God releases into your spirit when you choose to trust Him beyond what you can explain. Uncertainty will always exist because life is constantly shifting, Seasons change, people change, and outcomes are not always predictable. God's peace was never designed to be dependent on stability in the natural world. It is anchored in the unchanging nature of God Himself, which means it remains steady even when everything else feels fragile. Many people believe peace will come once questions are answered, problems are solved, or clarity is provided. But God's peace often arrives before answers, before solutions, and before clarity. It guards the heart and mind precisely because those areas are most vulnerable during uncertainty. Walking in peace means refusing to allow unanswered questions to dominate your thoughts or unresolved issues to control your emotions. It is the discipline of choosing calm over chaos, trust over fear, and rest over panic, even when logic demands anxiety. Uncertainty often triggers the desire to control outcomes, conversations, timelines, and people. Peace requires surrender. It asks you to release the illusion of control and accept that God is more capable of managing your future than you are. This surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. When you surrender, you stop fighting battles you were never meant to fight and start conserving spiritual energy for what truly matters. Peace flows most freely when striving stops and trust takes its place. Walking in peace also involves how you process information. In uncertain seasons, it is easy to overanalyze, overthink, and replay scenarios in your mind. Peace requires mental discipline. You must learn to recognize when your thoughts are moving you toward fear rather than faith. Peace grows when you intentionally redirect your focus away from worst-case scenarios and toward God's promises. What you meditate on determines what you experience internally. When your mind is fixed on uncertainty, anxiety grows. When your mind is fixed on God, peace takes root. Peace does not deny the seriousness of challenges. It simply refuses to magnify them above God. You can acknowledge difficulty while still remaining calm. You can recognize risk without becoming restless. Walking in peace means you face reality with confidence instead of dread. It allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally. This kind of peace gives clarity in decision-making and steadiness in relationships. It prevents you from making impulsive choices fueled by fear. Another dimension of peace is learning to slow down internally, even when life feels rushed externally. Uncertainty creates urgency, pressure, and the feeling that something must be fixed immediately. Peace allows you to pause. It reminds you that rushing rarely produces wisdom, and that God's guidance often comes in stillness. Walking in peace does not mean inactivity. It means moving at the pace of trust rather than the pace of fear. When peace governs your steps, you are less likely to miss divine direction. Peace also protects your emotional boundaries. In uncertain times, people around you may project their fears, opinions, and anxieties onto you. If you are not careful, you can begin carrying emotional burdens that are not yours. Walking in peace requires discernment about what you receive and what you release. You can listen without absorbing panic. You can care without carrying anxiety. Peace teaches you to remain compassionate without becoming overwhelmed. Walking in peace despite uncertainty also affects how you pray. Instead of praying from desperation, you begin praying from assurance. Your prayers become conversations rather than cries of panic. Peace-filled prayer trusts that God hears before you finish speaking and responds according to His wisdom. This type of prayer does not pressure God with timelines, but rests in His understanding of what is best. When peace shapes your prayer life, faith deepens and worry decreases. Peace allows you to wait well. Waiting is one of the greatest challenges during uncertain seasons because it feels unproductive and uncomfortable. Peace transforms waiting into a season of preparation rather than frustration. It helps you understand that delay is often purposeful and that God is working behind the scenes in ways you cannot see. Walking in peace while waiting keeps your heart from becoming bitter, impatient, or discouraged. It allows hope to remain alive even when progress feels slow. Another aspect of peace is learning to trust God with outcomes you cannot predict. Uncertainty often comes from not knowing how things will turn out. Peace does not require certainty about outcomes. It requires confidence in God's character. When you trust who God is, you can release the need to control how things end. Peace grows when you believe that regardless of the outcome, God will sustain you, guide you, and redeem what you cannot change. Peace also changes how you handle disappointment. Uncertainty increases the risk of unmet expectations, and unmet expectations can steal joy if not handled wisely. Walking in peace means learning to adjust expectations without losing faith. It allows you to grieve what did not happen without becoming hopeless about what still can. Peace helps you accept that some doors closing are acts of protection, not punishment, and some detours are actually divine redirection. Walking in peace requires guarding your spiritual atmosphere. What you listen to, what you watch, and what conversations you engage in all influence your inner calm. Constant exposure to negative news, fearful narratives, and toxic discussions can erode peace over time. Choosing peace may require intentional withdrawal from environments that feed anxiety. This is not avoidance, it is stewardship of your inner life. Peace grows in spaces where faith, truth, and hope are cultivated. Peace also affects your physical well-being. Anxiety manifests in the body through tension, fatigue, and restlessness. Walking in peace allows your body to rest, your breathing to slow, and your nervous system to reset. When your spirit is at peace, your body often follows. This does not mean challenges disappear, but it means they no longer dominate your physical responses. Peace brings alignment between spirit, soul, and body. Walking in peace does not mean you never feel fear. It means fear no longer leads. Peace acknowledges fear and then chooses to trust God anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. Peace gives you the strength to act wisely even when emotions are unsettled. It allows you to take steps of obedience without being paralyzed by uncertainty. Peace also reshapes how you see the future. Instead of viewing it as a source of threat, peace allows you to see it as a space where God will continue to reveal himself. You begin to expect God's faithfulness rather than anticipating failure. This expectation does not eliminate caution, but it removes dread. Walking in peace shifts your anticipation from anxiety to hope. Another important element of peace is acceptance. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It means recognizing what you cannot change and trusting God within it. Peace grows when you stop resisting reality and start responding with wisdom. Acceptance frees emotional energy that bubble as previously spent fighting circumstances and redirects it toward growth, prayer, and preparation. Peace also enables you to remain kind, patient, and grounded in relationships during uncertain times. Stress often causes irritability, defensiveness, and withdrawal. Walking in peace allows you to remain emotionally present and relationally healthy. It helps you listen better, speak more gently, and respond more thoughtfully. Peace keeps relationships from becoming casualties of uncertainty. Walking in peace requires daily renewal. Peace is not a one-time decision. It is a continual practice. Each day brings new opportunities to either trust God or surrender to anxiety. Peace is strengthened when you consistently choose prayer over worry, faith over fear, and rest over striving. Over time, these choices build spiritual resilience. Peace also brings clarity. Anxiety clouds judgment, but peace sharpens discernment. When your heart is calm, you are more likely to hear God's guidance and recognize wise counsel. Walking in peace allows you to make decisions from a place of alignment rather than pressure. It helps you distinguish between urgency that comes from fear and timing that comes from God. Walking in peace despite uncertainty ultimately transforms how you experience life. It does not remove challenges, but it changes your posture toward them. Peace allows you to live fully present rather than constantly anticipating problems. It anchors you in the present moment while trusting God with what lies ahead. When peace governs your heart, uncertainty loses its power to intimidate, distract, or dominate, and your spirit remains steady, confident, and deeply rooted in trust, even when answers are still unfolding and the path forward remains partially unseen. Living with expectation for divine breakthroughs begins with cultivating a heart posture that anticipates God's involvement rather than merely hoping for favorable outcomes. Expectation is not passive optimism. It is an active spiritual stance that believes God is present, intentional, and ready to act. When you live with expectation, you wake up each day believing that God can interrupt ordinary moments with extraordinary purpose. This mindset transforms how you approach time, prayer, work, and relationships. Instead of moving through life mechanically, you live alert, aware that any moment can become a divine encounter. Expectation requires faith, but it also requires vision. You cannot expect what you have never imagined. Many people limit their expectation because their vision has been shaped by past disappointments, repeated failures, or prolonged waiting. Divine expectation challenges you to see beyond history and believe that God can do something new without needing your permission to exceed your understanding. It invites you to expand your internal capacity to receive by allowing God to redefine what is possible. When expectation grows, limitations begin to lose their authority. Living with expectation also changes how you pray. Prayer shifts from routine request to confident dialogue. Instead of praying simply to cope, you pray believing something will shift. Expectant prayer listens as much as it speaks. It pays attention to nudges, impressions, and subtle instructions. Expectation creates space for God to respond in unexpected ways. It keeps your spirit open and receptive rather than closed off by skepticism or fatigue. When you expect divine breakthroughs, prayer becomes an exchange rather than a monologue. Expectation also affects how you interpret delays. Without expectation, delays feel like denial. With expectation, delays become seasons of preparation. Living expectantly allows you to believe that what appears slow is not wasted. It reframes waiting as an investment rather than a punishment. Expectation trusts that God is using time to strengthen character, sharpen discernment, and align circumstances. It allows you to stay engaged rather than discouraged while the process unfolds. Divine expectation requires emotional resilience. Breakthrough anticipation does not mean ignoring disappointment. It means refusing to let disappointment dictate your future outlook. Expectation acknowledges pain without surrendering hope. It gives you permission to feel but not to settle. When setbacks occur, expectation helps you recover more quickly because it believes that failure is not final. It keeps your heart flexible instead of hardened by repeated challenge. Living with expectation also impacts how you view opportunities. Expectant people recognize divine openings where others see coincidence. They understand that God often works through ordinary channels. A conversation, an invitation, a delay, or even a disruption can carry breakthrough potential. Expectation trains you to remain attentive rather than distracted. It keeps you from dismissing small beginnings that may be connected to significant outcomes. Expectation also requires courage. Expecting God to move exposes you to the risk of disappointment. It requires vulnerability to hope again after unanswered prayers. But courage is essential because fear-based living will always restrict expectation. Living with divine expectation means choosing to believe again, even when past experiences urge caution. It is the decision to trust God with your heart, even when outcomes are uncertain. Another key aspect of expectation is preparation. Expectation without preparation is incomplete. If you truly believe breakthrough is coming, your actions will reflect readiness. Preparation aligns your habits, mindset, and choices with what you are believing for. Expecting growth means cultivating discipline. Expecting opportunity means developing skill. Expecting change means adjusting behavior. Preparation demonstrates faith in motion, showing that expectation is not just internal belief, but external alignment. Expectation also influences how you speak. Words either reinforce expectancy or undermine it. Living expectantly means choosing language that aligns with faith rather than fear. It does not deny challenges, but it refuses to speak defeat. Expectant speech creates an atmosphere that welcomes divine activity. It shapes how you talk about your future, your circumstances, and yourself. Over time, your words begin to reinforce what you believe, and what you believe begins to influence what you experience. Living with expectation for divine breakthroughs also requires patience with process. Breakthroughs often arrive after sustained faithfulness rather than sudden effort. Expectation keeps you consistent when results are not immediate. It helps you show up daily, trusting that obedience accumulates even when progress is invisible. This patience is not passive waiting, it is active endurance. It allows you to remain committed without becoming rigid. Expectation also reshapes how you handle success. When breakthroughs come, expectant people recognize them as evidence of God's faithfulness rather than personal achievement alone. This awareness keeps gratitude alive and pride in check. Expectation understands that breakthroughs are invitations to stewardship, not entitlement. It encourages humility, responsibility, and continued dependence on God, even after prayers are answered. Another dimension of expectation is discernment. Not every opportunity is a breakthrough, and not every breakthrough looks dramatic. Expectation sharpens your ability to recognize what is aligned with God's purpose for your life. It helps you distinguish between distractions and divine assignments. Living expectantly means being selective about what you pursue and sensitive to what you release. Expectation also affects resilience during opposition. Resistance often increases just before breakthrough. Expectant living prepares you for this reality without discouragement. It understands that pressure can be confirmation rather than contradiction. When opposition arises, expectation keeps you from retreating prematurely. It reminds you that endurance is often required at the threshold of change. Living with expectation also deepens your spiritual awareness. You begin to notice patterns, confirmations, and timely provision. Expectation trains your spirit to recognize God's fingerprints in everyday life. This awareness strengthens faith and reinforces trust. The more you recognize God's involvement, the more confident your expectation becomes. Expectation also expands generosity. When you believe God is your source, you are less afraid of scarcity. Expectant living frees you to give, serve, and invest without fear of lack. It trusts that God replenishes what is released. This generosity is not transactional. It is rooted in confidence that divine supply is continuous. Living W. If expectation requires guarding your inner narrative, internal dialogue shapes external behavior. Expectation challenges negative self-talk and replaces it with truth. It reminds you that your current position does not determine your final outcome. Expectant people speak to themselves with hope rather than condemnation. This internal alignment strengthens emotional stability and spiritual confidence. Expectation also affects how you recover from mistakes. Instead of allowing failure to define identity, expectation treats it as instruction. It allows you to learn, adjust, and continue forward. Living expectantly means refusing to let regret anchor you to the past. It keeps your focus forward, believing that redemption is always possible. Another aspect of expectation is consistency. Breakthroughs rarely come to those who engage only occasionally. Expectation fuels perseverance. It keeps you praying when answers are delayed, believing when evidence is limited, and serving when recognition is absent. Consistency builds spiritual momentum that often precedes breakthrough. Living with expectation also invites joy into the process. Joy is not dependent on outcomes, it flows from anticipation. Expectation allows you to enjoy the journey rather than postponing joy until results appear. This joy strengthens endurance and makes faith sustainable over time. Expectation also sharpens focus. It helps you prioritize what matters and release what does not. When you expect divine movement, and you become more intentional with time, energy, and attention. Distractions lose their appeal because your vision is anchored in purpose. Living with expectation ultimately transforms how you see God. He becomes not just someone you believe in, but someone you anticipate. Expectation deepens relationship because it keeps you engaged, attentive, and responsive. It positions your heart to recognize divine movement whenever and however it comes, remaining open, prepared, and confident that God is actively working, even when the evidence has not yet surfaced, and the breakthrough is still forming beneath the surface of time and trust.